My parents evicted me to give my room to my sister's baby, so I bought their neighbor's house and let them watch me succeed daily. I'm a 26-year-old guy, and my parents kicked me out of my childhood home so my sister could have my room for her newborn. Even saying that out loud still makes my stomach twist. I grew up in that house. The smell of my dad's coffee at 6 a.m., the sound of my mom humming in the kitchen, the faint creak in the hallway outside my room. It wasn't just four walls. It was where I learned, dreamed, and built everything I thought family meant. But somehow, that all became negotiable the moment Emily, my older sister, the golden child, announced she was pregnant. Emily has always been the star. She could do no wrong. If she got bad grades, she's just creative. If I got a B, you need to focus more. I didn't resent her back then. I just accepted my role. The quiet one, the helper, the independent son who didn't need attention. I thought that independence made them proud. Turns out, it just made me disposable. That day, I came home from work, tired but content. I'd been helping my parents with rent, groceries, even their car repairs. But when I opened the door, something felt off. My walls were bare, my posters gone, my bed stripped. Cardboard boxes with my name scrawled in marker sat by the door. "Mom?" I called out, my voice cracking. She appeared from the hallway, eyes red, wringing her hands. "Honey, Emily and the baby need space. You're grown now. You'll understand one day. Family comes first." Her voice trembled, but her words were firm. Family comes first, except I wasn't included in that definition. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stood there, surrounded by my packed life, realizing that love in this house had always come with conditions. As I carried the first box to my car, my father avoided my eyes. Emily's laughter drifted from the living room, bright and careless. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't leaving a home. I was being erased from it. I didn't know it yet. But this was only the beginning of my family's cruel version of love. Growing up, I used to think favoritism was just something kids exaggerated about, until I realized I'd been living in it my whole life. Emily wasn't just the golden child. She was the sun in our family's universe. Everything revolved around her. When she wanted piano lessons, my parents paid for a grand piano. When I wanted to join soccer, they said it was too expensive. When she failed a college course, Dad laughed it off. She's finding her path. But when I missed a single rent payment after losing my job, I got a 30-minute lecture about responsibility. And now, after all that, they gave her my room, my childhood, my memories, traded for a nursery wallpapered in yellow stars and clouds. A few days after I moved out, I stopped by to drop off a package that had been delivered to my old address. When I stepped inside, my mother's face tightened, like she hadn't expected to see me so soon. Emily came down the stairs holding her belly and glowing like a saint. "Oh, hey," she said, smiling like nothing had happened. "We already set up the crib. You should see it. The room looks so much better now." I felt the words hit me like a punch. Better. I peeked down the hall. My walls, once covered in posters and photos, were now painted pale blue. My desk was gone, replaced with a rocking chair. The space where I used to dream, think, and cry now smelled like baby powder. Dad walked in with a can of paint, barely looking at me. "Good timing," he said flatly. "Grab that box, would you?" That was the moment it sank in. They hadn't just made room for Emily. They'd erased me completely, down to the walls, as I stood there in silence, watching my family fuss over the baby's room. I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit before. In this house, love wasn't unconditional. It was earned. And apparently, I'd stopped earning it the day I learned how to stand on my own. I didn't know it yet. But the distance they forced on me would one day become my greatest strength. The night they made it official is burned into my memory like a scar. I came home late from work, still wearing my oil-stained uniform, when I noticed an envelope taped to my bedroom door. My heart sank before I even opened it. Inside was a short, typed note. No warmth, no handwriting. Just words that felt colder than any winter night. "We need you to move out by the end of the week. Emily's due soon and she needs the space. You're an adult now. It's time you had your own place. No, we love you. No, thank you for helping us all these years. Just an eviction notice from my own parents. I found Mom in the kitchen, sipping tea like nothing was wrong. What is this? I asked, my voice barely steady. She sighed, not even meeting my eyes. You knew this was coming. Emily needs stability for the baby. You can't expect to live here forever. I clenched the note in my hand. There are 2 other rooms. Why mine? Dad looked up from the couch, remote in hand. Those are for guests. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Guests? I repeated, half laughing. You're choosing imaginary guests over your son? Mom snapped, her voice sharp now. Don't twist this. Family helps family. Emily needs us right now. I wanted to scream that I'd been helping family for years, covering bills, repairing the house, doing everything without complaint. But in that moment, I understood. My help had never been valued. It was expected. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, surrounded by boxes I hadn't packed. The walls felt closer, heavier. Every creak in the house sounded like a countdown. I thought about leaving a note behind. Something bitter, something final. But instead, I said nothing. I realized that silence hurts more than any goodbye. In a week, I'd be gone. And for the first time, my family wouldn't even notice the space I left behind. The night I moved out felt like a funeral. Not for a person, but for every illusion I'd ever had about family. I loaded the last box into my old car and stared at the house one final time. The porch light flickered like it always had, the curtains were drawn, and I could hear Emily's laughter echoing through the walls. It should have felt like closure. Instead, it felt like being erased from a story I helped write. My new apartment was a single-room unit above a mechanic's shop. The walls were thin, the air smelled faintly of oil and damp carpet, and the pipes rattled every time someone flushed. But it was mine. Or at least that's what I kept telling myself to drown out the loneliness. The first night I sat on the floor eating instant noodles, surrounded by unopened boxes and silence so heavy it pressed on my chest. I tried not to check social media, but curiosity won. There it was, a family post. My old room, freshly painted baby blue, filled with balloons and a crib. Emily cradling her newborn, my mother's caption underneath. Our home finally feels complete. Those 4 words gutted me. Finally complete. Like I was the missing piece they were better off without. Days bled into weeks. I worked double shifts, coming home to a bed that creaked and a ceiling that leaked whenever it rained. My phone stayed quiet. No calls, no check-ins. Not even a, "How are you doing?" One night, as thunder rolled outside, I caught myself whispering into the dark, maybe they're right. Maybe I really don't belong anywhere. That was my lowest point, when I started believing their rejection was proof I didn't deserve love. But sometimes, rock bottom is just the foundation of something new. I didn't know it yet, but that tiny, broken apartment would become the place where I rebuilt my entire life, piece by piece, out of nothing but anger and willpower. It started on a random Tuesday. I was walking home from a late shift, my hands numb from the cold, when I took a shortcut through my old neighborhood. I hadn't been back since the day I left. The air smelled the same, freshly cut grass and car exhaust, but everything else felt foreign. My parents' porch light was on, flickering softly like it always did. I should have kept walking, but then I saw it, a big, red, "For Sale" sign on the lawn next door. I froze. The house that once belonged to Mrs. Turner, our quiet neighbor who used to bring us cookies every Christmas, was up for grabs. And for some reason, that sight hit me harder than I expected. I stood there for a long minute, the wind biting at my face, thinking about how my parents could see that sign every day, how they'd watch someone new move in and make that place their home. Something in me whispered, "Why not you?" Of course, it sounded ridiculous. I was broke, living off microwaved noodles, barely able to pay rent. But that whisper didn't shut up. It grew louder every night I came home to that damp apartment. It followed me to work, into my dreams, until I couldn't ignore it anymore. I pulled out my old laptop and started researching. Real estate prices, business loans, freelancing jobs, anything that could help me build something. For the first time in months, I felt awake. Angry, yes. Hurt, absolutely, but also driven. I wasn't dreaming of revenge. Not yet. I just wanted to prove that I could exist without needing to beg for a place at their table. That night, I opened a new document on my screen and titled it Project Rebuild. It wasn't a plan. It was a promise. And as I typed those two words, I didn't realize it yet, but I just lit the first spark of the fire that would one day burn right across their fence line. Momentum came slowly at first, like pushing a car that refused to start. I picked up every freelance job I could find: social media management, copywriting, small ad campaigns for local shops. Most of it paid pennies, but I didn't care. I worked from that creaky apartment floor with my laptop propped on a cardboard box, surviving on caffeine and stubbornness. One night, while scrolling through listings, I stumbled across a company searching for a marketing consultant to rebuild their online image. Something about the name stopped me cold. Eastwood Tech Solutions. My brother-in-law's old employer. The same company he'd bragged about taking over someday before he got laid off for incompetence. I almost closed the tab out of guilt, but something in me said, no, apply. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in a video interview explaining my strategies for engagement and digital branding. The CEO, a sharp woman named Claire, nodded thoughtfully. "This is impressive," she said. "You sound like you've done this for years." I smiled faintly. You could say I've learned the hard way about bad business decisions. When she offered me the contract, I didn't realize how poetic it was, that I was stepping into the same role my sister's husband had failed at. I threw myself into the work, rebuilding their campaigns, rebranding their image, watching their numbers soar within months. Claire called me one evening just to say, "You turned this company around." That single sentence became fuel. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was rising. By the end of the year, I'd made more than I ever did working full-time. I upgraded my gear, built a small home office, and started getting referrals from bigger clients. But the twist wasn't just the success. It was the irony. My sister's husband started reaching out to me, asking if I could help him find work. And for the first time in my life, I had the power to say, "Sorry, I'm a bit busy these days." I didn't know it then, but fate was setting up a stage, one where my success would play out right next to the family that once threw me away. Money doesn't fix everything, but it sure changes how you breathe. By the start of the next year, I had clients across 3 states, a steady income, and something I hadn't felt in a long time: stability. My apartment no longer felt like a punishment. It became my headquarters. I replaced the stained carpet, bought a proper desk, and hung a single framed quote above it: "Build quietly." I lived by that. No gloating, no posts, no updates, just work. My parents still hadn't called, and neither had Emily, but I didn't chase them anymore. I was done begging to be seen. Then, out of nowhere, Emily called. I stared at her name, lighting up my phone like a ghost from another life. "Hey," she said, her voice a little too cheerful. "I heard you're doing well." "That's great." I waited, silent. She sighed. "Listen, things have been tough. Mark lost his job again, and with the baby." I cut her off gently. "I'm sorry to hear that." Her tone shifted. "Could you maybe lend us a little until he finds something? You've always been the responsible one." Responsible. That word. The same one they used when they needed something, not when they wanted to thank me. I told her I couldn't help right now, that I was still catching up on my own expenses. There was a pause, then a sharp exhale. "Wow," she said coldly. "I guess success changed you." "No," I replied quietly. "It just taught me who I was to everyone else." When the call ended, I sat there in silence, staring at the city lights outside my window. I didn't feel guilt this time. I felt freedom, but even freedom has a price. Word got back to my parents. My mother called 2 days later, furious. Not because Emily was struggling, but because I hadn't stepped in. "You're being cruel," she said. "Family helps family. Her words echoed the ones she used the day she threw me out. Only now, I finally understood the difference. I wasn't family when they didn't need me. And soon, they'd learn that the boy they evicted had turned into a man they'd have to watch rise, from right across their fence. It was almost poetic, the kind of irony you'd think only existed in stories. One afternoon, as I was finalizing a client deal, a notification popped up on my phone. A real estate listing in my hometown. Out of curiosity, I clicked it. My breath caught in my throat. It was that house, the one right next to my parents', Mrs. Turner's old place, still for sale. I hadn't driven by the neighborhood in over a year, but something in me shifted. The thought of buying that house wasn't about revenge, at least not consciously. It was about reclaiming something that had been stolen from me, belonging. So I booked a viewing. Driving through my old street felt surreal. My parents' house looked smaller somehow. The same wind chime hung on their porch, the same plants lined the walkway. But it didn't sting this time. I parked in front of the "For Sale" sign, stepped out, and looked around. The air smelled of cut grass and memory. When the realtor opened the door, I walked through each room in silence. The place needed work. Creaky floors, peeling paint, faded curtains, but all I could see was possibility. I imagined turning it into something bright, calm, and mine. When I told the realtor I wanted to make an offer, she asked, "You're sure? It's right next to your folks." I smiled. Yeah, that's exactly why. Weeks later, I stood on the front porch with the keys in my hand. My parents were outside, staring. My mother's watering can froze midair. Emily was visiting. I could hear the baby crying faintly from inside. Why here? My mom finally asked, her voice uncertain. I shrugged lightly. I guess I missed the neighborhood. Their expressions said everything. Confusion, discomfort, disbelief. But for me, it was peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't standing outside their world anymore. I'd built my own, right beside it. And the best part? Every sunrise from my new window would remind them exactly who they'd thrown away, and what he became without them. Moving in felt like closing a circle I'd been trapped in for years. The house smelled of fresh paint and possibility. I spent weeks renovating, sanding floors, replacing fixtures, planting new trees along the fence line that bordered my parents' yard. Each hammer strike, each brushstroke felt like therapy. I didn't need to shout or gloat. My presence alone was enough. Neighbors started dropping by to welcome me. Some surprised, others amused. "You bought this place?" One older neighbor laughed. "Didn't your parents kick you out once?" I smiled. Yeah, guess I didn't move too far after all. From my kitchen window, I could see into their backyard. I never stared long, but I'd catch glimpses. My dad mowing the lawn slower than he used to, my mom glancing at my house every time she watered her plants. They didn't wave. Neither did I. But the silence between us spoke louder than words ever could. One Sunday morning, while I was washing my car, my mother walked over. Her tone was overly casual, her eyes darting toward my sleek new vehicle. "You've done well for yourself?" she said softly. "Yeah," I replied, rinsing the hood. "Guess I had to." She hesitated, then asked, "Aren't you lonely here by yourself?" I looked up at her. Not anymore. Her lips pressed together, no words left. She turned and walked back home, shoulders stiff. Within months, people around town started talking. Not maliciously, but with curiosity. "He's really made it," they'd say. My clients grew, my savings grew, and the peace I built was visible, tangible. Meanwhile, Emily and her husband's financial problems worsened. I'd hear arguments drifting from the other side of the fence, angry, desperate, familiar. My parents' voices joined in sometimes, a blend of worry and denial. I never interfered. I didn't have to, because now they saw what life looked like without me, and what I looked like without their approval. And deep down, I knew the sweetest revenge wasn't revenge at all. It was success they had to watch every single day. It happened one evening just as the sun was dipping behind the rooftops, casting a golden glow across both yards. I was tending to my small garden, something peaceful I'd picked up since moving in. when I heard my father's voice over the fence. "Can we talk?" I turned to see him standing there, hands shoved deep in his pockets, eyes heavy with something between guilt and pride. It was the first time he'd spoken to me in months. "Sure," I said, wiping my hands on a towel. "What's up?" He stepped closer, his tone defensive before the conversation even began. "You've made your point." I frowned. "My point? That you're doing well. That you don't need us. You think we don't see the fancy car or the renovations? You're rubbing it in our faces." I couldn't help but let out a small laugh, the kind that comes when disbelief meets exhaustion. "Dad, I didn't buy this house to spite you. I bought it because you made it clear I didn't have a place in yours." His jaw tightened. "You know it wasn't like that, wasn't it?" I asked quietly. "You kicked me out so my sister could have a room, not because you had to, but because you wanted to. And now you're upset that I built something out of what you threw away?" He didn't answer right away. For the first time, I saw the weight in his eyes. Not pride, not anger, but something closer to shame. "You were always the strong one," he muttered finally. "We thought you'd be fine." I stepped closer, leaning on the fence that once divided everything between us. "You were right. I was fine. But it would have meant the world if you'd wanted me to be." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the hum of the crickets and the faint crying of Emily's baby in the distance. Then, quietly, he said, "We miss you." I smiled faintly. "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you turned me into a stranger." He left without another word. But I didn't feel angry, not anymore, just free. Because that was the night I realized something powerful. I didn't need an apology to move on. I just needed to stop waiting for one. The months that followed were eerily quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before everything falls apart. I didn't go looking for updates about my family, but in a small town, gossip travels faster than regret. Word spread that Emily's husband had finally walked out. The debts, the late payments, the constant pressure, it all caught up to them. He left one night, taking his car and whatever savings were left. I heard it first from a neighbor who stopped by to drop off mail that had been misdelivered. "Your folks are having a rough time," she said softly. "Emily's back home with the baby. Seems they're struggling to keep up." That evening, as I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, I could hear the tension across the fence. Muffled voices, then shouting, then silence. My mother's voice cracked as she tried to calm the baby. My father's tone was sharp, defensive. It was strange. The same house that once overflowed with pride now echoed with the sounds of everything crumbling. Part of me wanted to step in, to help. But then I remembered how easily they'd packed my life into boxes and called it love. Helping them now would mean erasing everything I'd fought to rebuild. Over time, the decay became visible. The once pristine lawn turned patchy and overgrown. The porch paint began to peel. The same wind chime that used to greet me when I came home now swung weakly, rusted and silent. One afternoon, I caught sight of my father sitting alone on the porch, staring at my house, the one I'd rebuilt, cared for, and made thrive. Our eyes met for a split second. He didn't nod. Neither did I. But the message hung between us like smoke. This could have been different. I wasn't celebrating their downfall, but I couldn't deny the poetic symmetry. They'd built a life on favoritism, and now they were trapped in the ruins of it. And for the first time, I realized revenge didn't have to roar. Sometimes it just had to sit quietly and let the silence speak. It's strange how peace doesn't arrive with fireworks. It just seeps in quietly one day, like sunlight through an open curtain. Months passed. I barely thought about my parents anymore. My business kept growing, and I finally bought the car I'd dreamed of since college. The house, my house, felt alive. Warm lights, clean air, quiet music humming through the evenings. For once, home didn't mean walking on eggshells. It meant breathing. One morning, I saw my mother outside, struggling to lift a bag of fertilizer. Without thinking, I walked over, helped her move it, and turned to leave. She looked at me, eyes glassy. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "I know," I said softly. "That's why I did. No grudges. No bitterness." Just truth. Later that week, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset, Emily came by. She looked exhausted, holding her baby on her hip. "He's getting big," I said. She nodded, managing a weak smile. "Yeah, I just wish things were different." I wanted to tell her they could have been, if she and our parents had seen me as more than just the backup plan. But instead, I just said, different doesn't always mean better. She left quietly, and I realized I no longer needed an apology from any of them. Their silence wasn't a wound anymore. It was closure. Standing there, looking across the fence at the house I used to call home, I felt something deeper than revenge. It was understanding. They hadn't destroyed me. They'd shaped me. Every cold word, every unfair choice, every ounce of neglect had carved me into someone who could stand alone and stand tall. I took one last sip of my coffee and smiled. Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud, or cruel, or even intentional. It's just peace, the kind that echoes loud enough for everyone to hear.